Hello, Weekend Hangover. I am joining a conversation with Laura Buffington that she started yesterday, talking about beauty and how beauty, like many of the other topics, so we've discussed truth, reality, sex, life, death, all these different things can point us towards God. And so we're going to continue talking about beauty. Hopefully, you find it stimulating, but even more than that, meaningful as we talk about everything, hopefully from why it exists to how it exists, what it does for us, and how we can practice it. So, Buff, it's great teaching yesterday. Like you and I were discussing a little bit ago, that you really brought beauty. You think the fullness of beauty exposes grace, and even just the opportunity to experience beauty is grace. And what, if anything, do you have maybe left over to spill over into right now from yesterday that you wish you said or wish you didn't say? Or
Yeah, I feel two ways about it. Oh, also our producer Archie is also in the studio with us.
Hey, Archie.
He's pretty excited about it. Yeah, any attention he can get. Also, I feel two ways about it. One is that it's the kind of thing that I could never stop talking about. That it's a really important piece of my own sort of spiritual formation is just the
Hmm.
search for beauty and conversations around it and how it's God's gift to us. So in one sense, I can never stop talking about it. On the other sense, I wish I would have stopped talking about it like 10 minutes earlier yesterday. Like there's a sense in which in that moment, I think it's, you want to be clear, you want to be direct. And I think I just had so many things. It was like, oh, I have to say this thing. I have to say
Yeah.
somebody somewhere needs to tell this story. So yeah, you
Hmm.
feel like I think that can happen when you're trying to talk about a thing you care about, right? It's
Yeah.
you pour it all out, and sometimes it can make it messier, but
Yeah.
hopefully something worked for folks yesterday.
Yeah. I know it did for me. And I think that the curse of caring, that's a good thing to have to carry,
Yeah,
you
and
know.
honestly, I was so like when the topics came out, I looking at the series, it was like Charlie asked which ones I wanted to do. It was at the top of my like I was like, please let
Mm.
me do this one. So, and I was just so glad it was on the list because I think it would have been
Yeah.
easy to leave it off the list. It would have been easy
Hmm.
to talk about all the other stuff and to
Yeah.
leave beauty off.
Hmm.
Um, and I think in our own life, it can be tempting to think of it as a luxury item.
Hmm.
But for me, it's actually a survival tactic. I think it's pretty essential.
Yeah, so that brings me to talking about how beauty we typically think is form, and then we think other aspects or things in that we engage with in life, materials or people or whatever, also a function. And so is form, the beauty part, just this decorative thing, or does beauty also have a function? I think that we could make a great case that it does. We see right in the very beginning of the creation story that in the fullness of creation, beauty has its place because we read about God creating this tree that produces fruit, and He says it's pleasing to the eye. There's beauty, and then we also hear from the poet that all of this is good.
Yeah, yeah. I think sometimes I was just thinking as you were talking about food, maybe because it's
Mm,
lunchtime. We have to
yeah.
postpone our lunch so we're not eating over weekend hangover. But I was thinking about that. There's a passage from Paul where he talks about like their God is their belly. And
Mm,
I think growing up, sometimes we think that beauty's like even just good food, like, there's something idolatrous about it.
mm,
Um, that it's bad to enjoy things. But I think one of the ways I've start seeing that differently is that some people it is their an act of worship for them to make beautiful food.
mm,
So it
mm.
it could just be beauty for beauty's sake. Like just you could eat some fancy meal just because
Uh,
you want that, like that pleasure that you talked about on happiness weekend. But there's also something to be said that like some people are made to make beautiful food and
mhm,
that if we do those things with our eye towards the God who made us, if we make if we make our living room look welcoming and inviting and more beautiful than it needs to be to like
mm,
just get relaxing done, That could just be because God has put it in somebody's heart to make
Yeah.
beautiful settings, you know? So
Yeah.
I think we're taught that it can be idolatrous sometimes to appreciate beauty,
Yeah.
and I think it is a switch. There's a flip of the switch to see that it actually can honor God, not just to enjoy the
Yes.
beautiful things, but to be the people who make them. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I think it was Pascal had this whole monologue about how amusement, anything amusing, uh, had potential to pull someone in their Christian faith adrift, and he like warned everyone not to go to theater.
Yeah.
But on that same stage, you could tell this, stories of redemption and gospel, and so you're right. We have this whole, thing that pleasure is taboo, or appreciating beauty. I think for me the most helpful thing is talking about a really basic but also complex, the beauty of a flower, because everyone, I imagine, would agree that if we were to hold up a carnation or something, a flower, we would see that there's a created order for it to function, but you have pollination and involving other flowers and birds and bees and butterflies. But essentially, flowers develop this beauty to attract birds and bees and butterflies, and how that attraction has a function where it leads to more life giving, the transferring of its pollen to another flower.
Yep,
And
there's your birds and your bees talk, parents.
oh,
Cut
I'm
that
ready.
out. Cut that out and just show that to your kids when they're ready to
Yeah.
talk birds and the bees. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a good example that we see this in the modern world is the leap from Microsoft to Apple.
Yeah.
As Microsoft does it work? And then Steve Jobs comes along and he says it's not just enough that it works, but it needs to be beautiful in its use, the ease it needs, and which is fascinating to me because um, the love that people have acquired for Apple products is very deep, and it's
Yeah.
the bringing together of form and function.
Yeah. Oh, that's the thing I was going to say about Bono. Actually, in that interview book, he talks about Apple making technology sexy. And I
Yeah.
remember reading that and just being like, wait, what? And then I
What?
realized, like, oh, no, that's actually true.
True.
Of course, my current phone, their latest update has turned my phone into a virtual battery fire. So I would like a little more functioning from the Apple
To go with your
Corporation
form.
right now. Yeah, I've got this super
Uh-huh.
sexy phone that's just on fire.
Yikes.
So it's not great, but I
Yeah.
like that this has just basically become like the phone show. Last week you talked about your phone. This week
Did.
it's the phone show.
My phone, although brought me happiness, and yours,
It's causing
not so much right now.
death. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. You and I were talking a little bit about some of the lies that we believe about beauty, that
Yeah.
we've either told or we've been told.
Yeah.
And the value of when you start talking about beauty, what call those out so we can have a more hopefully useful dialogue on it.
Yeah, and I think it's worth saying too, like every Monday or every Monday previously, we love other people to chime in. Like if there's something you've ever learned about beauty that you figured out was not true, you're welcome to chime in on that. And I think it's worth saying too that we were talking about this before. Like beauty is treated like it's a feminine conversation sometimes, but it's just as relevant to men. It's just that word. So that's one of the lies, maybe, is that it's limited to females.
Yeah.
But I think men are equally concerned with aesthetics,
Yep.
with the lines of their car being beautiful, or, with their house. Like everybody's concerned about it. It just takes different shapes. But
Yeah.
my first thought on that, my first answer is that we turn it into a competition. That it's beauty for the sake of holding ourselves up against other more beautiful or less beautiful things. So I think the idea that the world is a beauty competition, whatever that looks like, whether that's your car, your house, your body, your face, like the idea that beauty is a way to compete, I think, in whatever form that takes, is a frustration to me that we didn't really get into talking about, but it's always, I think people know enough to know that lives there in the conversation.
It absolutely does.
Yeah. What were your thoughts?
I feel like, and this is even a personal struggle for me to recognize beauty is that sometimes I buy into the line that beauty actually means perfection, which is the absence of any defect. And
Right.
if that's your definition, you will you'll be at odds with your own body, and you'll have conflict with the work that you do. Even what you can accomplish with your hands, because nothing that you do will be good enough. So if you can separate the lie that beauty is perfection, then what is beauty?
Yeah.
I think that's where the conversation starts to get interesting.
Yeah, I love that. I We hadn't talked about this, but I sold my parents' house, right? And they
Mm-hmm.
had lived in this house for 50 years. And somebody came along, like a flipper, bought it, and I can see the pictures online of like what they did to it, and they made it
Mm-hmm.
in a certain sense beautiful, right? They
Okay.
put in hardwood floors, they painted over all these things that like my parents had lived there for so long, and it had been a long time since
Mm-hmm.
they renovated anything. So in a certain sense, they made it beautiful. But they also, like, I'm guessing that they probably got rid of the part in the door where I carved my
Mm-hmm.
initials
Mm-hmm.
as a little kid. Like they covered up a bunch of stuff in the basement. There was like shag carpet and like wood paneling, so that it was basically like time traveling if you went into the
Yeah.
basement. And so to me, that had a beauty that I could walk through that house and like see my whole life
Mm-hmm.
story. So that was a certain kind of beauty,
Yeah.
um, that is now a different kind of
Kind of beauty.
beauty,
Huh.
like it's
Yeah.
all it's all in the eyes.
Well, yeah, and I think that would go with the other lie that beauty is youth.
Hmm.
That seems to be something that we've bought into as a culture.
Yeah,
Somehow faces without creases and lines are more beautiful, and obviously that's just cultural perception. And we're working through as a society. Shape, color, and size are not at odds with each other in beauty,
yeah,
and so there's this kind of shifting
yeah.
that is happening.
I think we
Uh,
we should have at least learned a little bit about that from the Friends reunion. I don't know. I don't know
I
if
haven't
anybody
watched it
else
yet. It's on my
tuned in.
list.
What I think is fascinating about the Friends reunion is that, I wish now that we're talking about this, I should have talked about it at the weekend. I really need to
On
know
the
what other
weekend.
people think about this. So chime in, Friends fans. But I think what's fascinating about the Friends reunion is that you can watch their 27-year-old selves
Mm,
on streaming services. Right. So, and we see it, like, if you're a Friends fan, you probably regularly tune into those reruns. And so then all of a sudden you have them on your screen at, what are they? They're in their 50s, right? And I think
mm-hmm.
it was so jarring to people. And in their case, a lot of them have done some work to get rid of the wrinkles, right? And so
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
paying the
And then
price
some
of
of them
trying to
haven't.
hold on to that beauty. Yeah. But I
Yeah.
think there was so much like online, like, why am I sitting around thinking about my mortality as I'm watching the Friends reunion? Like, why am I
Because it's on
feeling the
display.
passage of time? It's
Yeah.
because you could tonight watch them at the age of 27. And now
Mhm,
all of a sudden on your screen is them at
mhm.
54 or whatever they are.
But we're still interested in the 54 version,
Yeah.
aren't we?
Right. I mean, it's fascinating. And I think it's because we don't see that. It's harder to see in ourselves.
Mhm.
Sometimes we're,
Yeah.
I know I look in my mirror and I do sort of see myself as young. And then I see my other friends my age and I'm like, man, why do they look so old? And I think it's just that our perception of ourselves, in whatever direction it goes, is never quite to be fully trusted. I think it's why it's so important in a
Mhm.
million ways for us to have other people be
Yeah.
good. We need good, true, um, loving mirrors in our lives. And I
Mhm.
think that's important.
That's where I would go. Like if I were to draw the line between what beauty is and what beauty isn't, I think I would separate beauty from perfection. But right next to beauty, I would have goodness.
Hmm.
Which I think then testifies to what those creases in faces can mean. It can mean evidence of lots of laughter and smiles, or frowns and grieving, and that's goodness.
Yeah. Shout out to the Brandy Carlisle song about all of these lines across my face. They tell you the story.
Now
I
that's
know
good
I know we have
art.
some. Yeah, that's good, right?
Yeah, and so you and I had on the docket. We wanted to talk about why Christian art sucks.
Yeah. Hashtag. Yeah.
Hashtag
Why is it so
Brandy
bad?
Carlisle's better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who
So
she is a faith. She's a person who is interested in
she,
Jesus for sure. Yeah.
yes, she is, but she isn't under the Christian art
Yeah.
label.
Yeah. And that's a piece of the puzzle, right? I think when you're talking about movies and music and novels, paintings, whatever, I think there is a whole industry that wants
Hmm.
to draw these super clear lines between sacred art and
Yeah.
secular art. And sometimes I think that is what gets in the way
Hmm.
of that, is that if somebody falls in that messy middle where it's like they are interested in the story of who God is and what that means for humans. If they
Yeah.
fall into that messy middle and their is not super clear that it's their goal is Christianness,
Yeah. Like an explicit.
yeah, there's
Okay.
a lot of people that I think you and I both love that would fall into some sort of middle
Uh
of
huh.
being interested just about being humans, but also being interested in who God might be to us. And
Mm,
I think that's where the interesting stuff lives, but it's harder to sell. Over the
yeah.
Rhine, we've done some of their songs on the weekends,
Hmm.
because
Sure have.
they have
All
that
my favorite
all
people
my
are
favorite people
broken.
are broken. Look,
Oh,
we thought of the
such a
same
good
song.
song.
It's like one of the most Christian songs I know, but it
Yeah.
wouldn't fit on a Spotify playlist. Um,
Okay, love or
yeah, and I remember I was actually listening to a Spotify playlist that was like all Christian music, and it was like a lot of the stuff you might expect. And then all of a sudden, there
mhm,
was a Noah Gunderson song that sounded
mm,
so sad
yeah,
and
yeah,
sounded so defeated.
hmm,
And I was like, my ear like turned. I was like, oh, now this song is
yeah,
true,
yeah,
right? And that's a part of it. Is I think in art, it's like not just depicting the perfection, but it's good art is
mhm,
also honest about what it feels like to be a person. And that is
so
sometimes
true.
like that. You sometimes have to cuss if you're going to tell the truth
Yeah,
about what it is to be a
yeah,
person, or you have to
yeah,
tell the morning after story of the night, where you were your broken self. And
hmm.
those are harder to sell as Christian
They
stories
are too.
sometimes.
And I think the real frustrating part about that is then Christian art is it's sold for less than what it can be because if art really it comes from the creator of art, the original artist, then any art indicates that it came from something. And so then, the honesty piece is probably for me the cheapest part of Christian art, and the fact that it can't just be art, period, and then point to God. It feels cheaper to me
Yeah.
too. But I do feel like as a person who's recognized on the Southbrook stage is using music as a way for us to connect with God. I do not think all Christian art is cheap, but I do find myself frustrated with how Christians aren't all very involved in industries of art making.
Yeah.
They're not leading the way. I do think there are amazing artists who are Christians who are making great art. I just
Yeah.
think that
It's
we've
harder to
trapped
find.
ourselves.
It's
Yeah.
harder to find, I think.
Hmm.
You have to really search for it sometimes.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
One thing
okay.
I've been trying to do is to recognize is like, even if something like whoever made it, like if I can find something in it that is grace to me, is just to appreciate it where I can find it. So if a TV show or a song or a novel or whatever that does point me towards what grace looks like, I want to recognize, like, just be glad to God that it exists in the world, like
Yeah.
whoever's hands made it.
Yes.
So
Ooh, that's good.
that's been a helpful thing to me. Um,
Yeah. That kind of feels like the how to make beauty a practice.
yeah,
Yeah, because I really got that sense from you while you're teaching on Sunday that you're kind of curating, in a sense, like all of these experiences that you've had or that people can have through creation and stuff. So it felt like you were helping us practice beauty.
yeah. It for me has been I don't know. It's been a means of survival.
Mm,
The world throws plenty of not perfect things. Our friend Shan is reminding us about the kintsugi pottery story, which I just heard somebody else
mm,
talking about this morning. Right? How they put pieces of pottery back together with metals that make it
Yes.
more beautiful than when it was
Uh-huh.
not broken. Um,
Yes.
but I think it's, like just today, there's a story about this park that I take Archie to all the time, and somebody was just like walking around this lake and found a leg. They just found a leg in the lake. Nobody knows whose leg it is. Like, there are awful things that happen all the time. That condo that fell in Miami, you have all these people
Mm,
just hoping that their loved one wasn't home when the world is full of really not beautiful things. And so,
mhm,
as a means of survival for myself,
mhm,
I've tried to make sure I'm paying attention to what is beautiful in the world. Um, and that looks like a lot
mm,
of different things. Sometimes that means like intention. So I was telling you,
mhm,
one of the things I've tried to do is just like, I don't think beauty has to be the thing that you fly across the country to see, or that you pay $100 to see at the
mm.
museum. Like, it can be like the local metro parks. It can be like the
Yes.
things that you drive by. I was telling you on Friday, I just went to the Whetstone Park of Roses here in Columbus that I drive by all the time on High Street. And I was like, oh, I have to talk about beauty. I should probably just go look at something beautiful. And it's just this Park of Roses that a bunch of volunteers maintain every year. And you can just walk through and sit there in all this beautifulness. And I think
Mm,
like looking for it around you, and making sure
mhm,
that you have enough time built into your life every once in a while to pay attention to it. Yeah.
mhm.
Do you have any ways that you
Yeah,
practice beauty?
I think you remind me of Philippians 4:8 that, finally, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is
Yeah.
pure, whatever is lovely. And the list goes on, but, think about these things. There is a requirement of intentionality, even to experience the lovely. And so I like to just shake up some things. Like I was telling you that my family, um, Katie and I will sometimes have our daughters pray with us after a meal. That's something that a beautiful process of something that died in order to give us life,
Yeah.
instead of the normal rhythm of only praying before the food, praying
Yeah.
after you've enjoyed it,
I
is
love that.
something that we do. Just change a small way, change up to be intentional.
Yeah. I think that's
Yeah.
also a place where we expect perfection from ourselves is in prayer, right? And some of
Mm.
the best prayers are just,
Mhm.
God, that was good food. Or like, God,
Yeah.
that could have used more salt, but I'm still glad I got a meal. Like, um, I think that's where it's another place
Mhm.
where the arts could teach us what it is to
Mhm.
accept
Yeah.
something as less than beautiful, perfect
Ooh.
as beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Libby is
I
giving us a shout out that Southbrook has done a pretty good job of not being. I think we've made art a priority. I do think that is a piece
mm,
of who Southbrook is.
yeah.
Is
And I'll speak to that. I think that Southbrook has had a difficult, or let me say, a challenging, unique journey in the way that we use art, especially on the platform. Is that we are constantly sifting through. John Waldron is constantly sifting through music and saying, no, that does not express authentically, or doesn't express truthfully, or it doesn't express. It's one thing to say the truth, and it's another thing to say the truth well, uh, with craft, and so it's a labor for our team, and there are tons of churches around it that are a little bit more, oh great, like this artist just put out the song, we're going to use it because we use all their music, and it doesn't work like that for us. We end up sometimes even grieving that an album that someone would release doesn't seem like it fits us.
yeah,
So I love hearing that you think that we help craft experiences that are relatable and sift through the art, because I think that was one of the things, Buff, that you were expressing, is that we wish, and we kind of rely on this idea that all good art comes to the surface,
yeah,
which is not necessarily true.
yeah, yeah. There is this sense, and it's in everything we do. I think if you're a writer or whatever your business is, I think there's this sense like, oh, if I just do a good job, somebody will see this. It'll eventually be appreciated. And I think that's especially true with people who are artists. Like, if I just plug away at this, it will eventually be valuable. But we have this funny world where can't always trust people's perception of beauty or
Yeah.
goodness. We were talking
Yeah.
about Vincent Van Gogh. I find his. I'll hold it up. This, if you wanna, this is a good beach read. It's called Lust for Life. It's got the word lust in it. That's sexy, right?
Ooh, can't
Uh,
believe you're recommending it.
it's so funny. It's not a sexy book. It's just him it's like kind of a fictionalized biography of his life. Um, what's fascinating to me about most people who make beautiful things is that nobody knows they're beautiful until after those people are gone. That most of the things that we consider most valuable, the people who make them and create them, are hardly ever appreciated in the moment. I think that's just such a fascinating thing about
Hmm.
people, that we are slow sometimes to see what's beautiful. Um, so,
Wow.
and his story, I love his story. He has all these years that I feel like nobody really knows about before he painted
Hmm.
these $1 million
Yeah. He's a
paintings.
lay minister.
Yeah, he was a preacher. My Do we have time for the coal mining story?
Let's go. I love the
Tell it.
coal
Okay.
mining story.
So there's a Vincent Van Gogh story where he went to this, like, he was sent to this tiny little coal mining town to be like the evangelist, the preacher, the missionary sort of. And he was having a really hard time, like, getting them to listen to him. And apparently he wasn't as great of a preacher as a painter, but also the people felt like detached from him. They felt like he was an
Mm,
outsider. So one day he went to the coal mines just to, like, learn a little bit more about their world. And then he went to a family's house afterwards, and all of a sudden he was able to, like, draw kind of a crowd, and people were listening to him and responding to him, and they were engaging him in conversation. And he went home that night and realized, like, he looked in a glass and saw that his face was covered in coal,
mhm.
and that a part of why he was able to have conversation with people was because he finally looked kind of like them. He looked like he understood how they spent their day in these caves.
Yeah.
And so here's this beautiful story about a painter. Uh, but yeah, I just think it has a ton to teach us. That's what I love about it.
Hmm.
Why using the word beautiful more often is because there are more beautiful than we give credit
Hmm.
for. So, like, a story, a song, a bird,
Hmm.
like, whatever.
Hmm.
There's more beautiful things than we know. So
That's awesome.
I think we wanted to finish with doing the why exercise one more time, right? Because
Yeah, this time has gone by quickly.
it did go fast, but we can do this. We'll
Yeah.
do it. We'll do it
Yeah.
kind of fast. So we talked about the why exercise last week, and I think this is actually this is good on the how to practice beauty, right? Because it's
Yeah.
like, well, so let's say you see something you appreciate or you love or you call beautiful, then do that thing where you say, now why? Like, why is
Mhm.
this thing beautiful to me? Why do I appreciate
Yeah.
it? And the more you ask the why, the closer you might get to something that
Yeah.
feels like worship, or to understanding who God is. So
Mm.
let's, you want to go first? What's a beautiful thing?
Yeah. Uh, uh, I talked to you briefly about one thing, but I think I'm one of the most beautiful things to me, uh, and it's through my experience as a musician, is that you can hear notes that don't seem like they should go together, and somehow they break the rules, but they're beautiful, and that's why one of my favorite genres of music is jazz. It's one of the genres of music that just doesn't make sense why we appreciate it, and so that kind of perplexing piece of order and chaos, and the yin and the yang need each other. They have pieces of each other that sustain, and so that helps jog me. It helps me get out of thinking that beauty is perfection, but beauty is goodness. And so I would definitely say, Jess, I answered the why without
Yeah, but
you
there's always a
asking me.
deep why. So why
Okay.
chaos? What do you like about a little more
Yeah.
chaos in your music?
I think that's because for me, I tend to drift to thinking that something has to be without defect for it to have value. I love working with my hands. Right now, we're building a house, and I'm having to accept that there are going to be many corners, pieces of tile, the way that a window is set in its depth with the drywall or whatever. There's all of these things that I have to accept about this house that are not going to be perfect. But then when I think about what the house stands for is a hopefully a haven, a resource to use to offer to others, to um, give life and to share life, to have tables where bread is broken. And, so I think it's a reminder that non-perfect things have beautiful function.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I can't wait to come to your house.
Okay.
I look forward to praying after dinner with
coming someday. That's awesome. So, how about you? Beauty with the Y.
Yeah, I have two answers that I can't figure out which one's more fun to talk about. I'm gonna go with birds.
Okay. I didn't see that coming.
My second one, the more meaningful one maybe is like doing races. Like that's a beautiful thing to me that doesn't look beautiful on the outside, but is. But I think I'm going with birds, which sadly birds have diseases right now. The birds are sick and they're having problems seeing and dying and stuff. See, this is why I need beauty, because I immediately go to why birds are suffering.
So it's the suffering of birds.
Yeah, I feel like over the last year, no, not the. I don't find the suffering beautiful. I'm just saying that, by the way, they're also suffering right now.
I was gonna say that's a little masochistic.
I think because they just exist and sing. Like that's just their job. Is just get up and I guess they find food and they make new birds. Like they do. They have some other
flowers.
Yeah, but they're right. Back to the birds and the bees.
Yeah, here we go.
But I think they're just supposed to be there, and I think also just the variety of them. And then if you were to say why, I would say this was the thing I learned from my mom. She, as she was suffering, started to get more and more at peace sitting on the porch. So we'd sit on the porch and just watch, and birds became like her favorite thing. So ducks, geese, the backyard brown birds, like it didn't matter what they were. And my friend Brad, we have a theory about birds that as you get older, like first you just start to notice them. And then you're like, oh, I think I'm a little older because I'm starting to notice the birds. And then the thing is that you start to like learn their names. Like you start to learn types of birds. That's like maybe in your 60s or so.
Yeah.
And then as you get older and you fade more, you befriend them. So there's
that's true.
Like
I immediately thought of the dove lady.
Yeah, you start talking
the pigeon
to them.
lady in Home Alone.
Yeah, you start keeping company with birds.
Yeah.
And it's either a regression or a progression. I'm not sure.
I think progression.
Yeah, there's something to that. My mom would literally like talk to them, and she would, when they would sing back, she'd make noises at them and sing to them and ask them how they were doing. And it was company to her. Like she felt free to just sit with birds in a way that people were harder for her. So I think I see my future. I might as well start making friends with them now.
Be a bird lady.
Yeah.
That's better than a cat lady.
Yeah.
Be a bird lady.
Yeah, at least it'll get me outside. So I look forward to that, befriending the birds.
That's awesome.
But yeah, that's my answer.
So you and I had talked about, this maybe being one of, this is our last weekend hangover for the summer.
Yeah.
And having a couple words to say about the series as a whole, and something that you and I found helpful in our journey of faith has been N.T. Wright's signpost idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if I were to characterize or explain what the past series has been, it would be looking at every single one of these things. Like you think about love, and then for love to exist, there has to be the choice not to love, and how that points to God. And then how justice, why do we have this deep, deep yearning for things to be right? What are all those things doing?
Yeah. Yeah, he talks about that in Simply Christian is the first book where he talks about that. And then Broken Signpost is the one where he talks about how they're not quite living up to what the world could be. But yeah, I think that same thing. We talked about this, how, it's basically playing the why exercise with all the topics, right? Why do these things matter? Yeah. Why do we keep returning to conversations about death and love and sex? And like, why do we keep coming back to beauty? Like, if you ask the why question about each one of the topics, I think our hope is that you will eventually get to a good God who made us and wants a better life for us and a better world, and that the kingdom of the heaven is about that world becoming more and more real. And I think what's interesting is, like, looking around our world, sometimes the end point is the thing. Like, beauty could be the end of that could be the end of the conversation for you, is I just want things to be beautiful, or I just want love, or
every person has a different signpost that has a more profound guiding direction for them.
Yeah. Or, like, we talked about reality, right? Or meaning, like, I just want these things. But every one of those things, as good as they can be on their own, has a next step where you get to a God who gifted us those things, I think, is our premise.
And it's almost like a trail of breadcrumbs that are trying to hint towards him.
Yeah. And I think for most of us, those things can feel like a false happiness or a false satisfaction. I think what we've tried to point to in these conversations is that really having a good conversation about him should ultimately take us back to God. And I think even to the life of Jesus, I don't know if I said it quite as strongly as I wish I had, but ultimately he is the end of all those conversations. Is Jesus living a beautiful life, right? Is him being ultimate reality, is him being ultimate love. And so I think we should end up there at the end of the series, is getting, asking why of ourselves, and hopefully every question we ask eventually gets there. But
I think that's a great way to end today with those words.
We are going to post the discovery questions. I think our hope is that, I always say this, every weekend should be the start of the conversation and not the end. And so I think Weekend Hangover will return in some form. I don't know if it'll be the live show, because that was kind of a COVID, that was a COVID idea. So it may become a podcast or something. But the discovery questions will always be there. I think our hope is always, as a church, that we're starting people talking. Yeah, we're not finishing the sentence. So
yeah, that's great. So maybe as we're closing up here, ask somebody a why about something they find beautiful, or think of a way to practice beauty on your own or with others.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Levi. This has been fun these last couple weeks.
It has been fun.
Over Zoom. It's been good.
Yeah. It's been good. And beauty is good. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.